Welcome to the Career Change Podcast, where you'll discover the frank and practical advice and resources that are already proven to work in the real world when it comes to changing careers or figuring out what business is right for you when you are a smart but likely also stuck, overwhelmed, or overthinking person in your mid-30s, your 40s, your mid-50s. I'm your host, Rikke Hansen, a career change advisor, entrepreneur, and former corporate HR professional with over 15 years experience of helping thousands of people just like you identify or create careers or businesses that are both meaningful and future-proof. Welcome home. Hey, it's Rikke here. Welcome to episode 62 of the Career Change Podcast. When a new career plus job is not the solution. So many people who feel stuck or unhappy in their job, they think the solution is just to find a new career they're truly passionate about, find their passion and then get a job in that new career. Now, for some people, that works out great. But for others, for some of you, especially a certain type of professional over 40, you can make that change and still find yourself feeling just as unhappy, just as stuck, and sometimes even worse off than before in that new career plus job. And maybe you have this fear too. What if I change and end up worse? I'm recording this episode, my dear listener, to help you avoid that, all right? And what I want to do, I want to frame this particular episode with a really important question that I want you to ask yourself, a question that I want you to sit with right from the very start. What if your real career problem isn't actually your current profession or your current career, but rather the day-to-day experience of working for someone else, of being an employee? So let's talk about the problem here. After over 2 decades as a career change advisor for professionals over 40, one of the reasons why my clients, they manage to make real career changes in the real world for the better, why they end up, actually solving the right problem, is because I make sure they don't just treat their career change as an exploratory process. A lot of people think a career change is just about finding something else, right? But that's not all it is. And sometimes that's not even the solution. Part of what a really good and meaningful and exciting career change is all about is treating it as a problem-solving exercise. And part of my process when it comes to working with my clients, part of the process actually involves in helping them get really clear on what their current career problem is right at the beginning of their career change process. What is the real problem we want to make sure we solve for by making a change so that we don't end up replicating that problem or making it worse in their next thing. There's no point in going from the frying pan to the fire with your pain points, right? That's really what we're trying to avoid here. And one of the ways I help my clients avoid ending up worse off is to make sure that we distinguish between subject and context, when it comes to figuring out where most of their current career pain points they come from and what we therefore need to solve for and avoid replicating in the next thing. So your subject is what you actually do. It's your profession, it's your expertise. If you are currently a lawyer, your subject is law. Your job description activities, they're bathed in your subject. It will inform all the activities that you do. However, your context is how you do your career, how you exercise your profession. It's how you do it, where you do it, when you do it, and who you do it with. So how you actually undertake this career, this profession, where you do it, what kind of company setup, what kind of work setup, what kind of work context. It's also when you do it, when are your working hours? When does it happen? And then also, who do you do it with? Who are your colleagues or your clients or all of the who's that you interface with throughout the day, that you work with, that you're exposed to? And here's the thing. For most of you listening, your current context right now is an employee setting, right? You are paid to work for someone else. Here's the flip side of that. They therefore decide and dictate the context. right? The terms of how, where, when, and who you work for. So if you're right now a lawyer, how you work and where you work and when you work and who you work with and how you practice law is context, right? So in a lot of online career change advice, and also especially if you've always been an employee or have what I call an employee mindset, the focus is generally almost exclusively on just changing the subject, find a new career, find a new profession. And I can understand if you kind of bought into that and think that's going to solve everything, because if you've never had any control over your work context, you probably don't even realize or consider how much of your current pain might actually be coming from the context. But if your real pain points in your current career are actually, and what makes you unhappy, are actually mostly down to how, where, when, and who you work with, and not really what you do, your career, when you're actually allowed to get on with it, then finding another profession or career subject and then getting a job in that new profession or job just means that the same pain points to a smaller or larger extent will keep turning up. And it's only a matter of time until the novelty of the subject wears off and you are left with the same fundamental problems, because how you work, where you work, when you work, and who you work with from job to job is still completely out of your hands when you work for someone else. You might end up solving a few, but then the next job might blow it all, right? So if your career problem right now is mostly a context problem and not really a subject problem, then staying within an employee framework is not going to solve your main problem, no matter how great the new career is or how passionate you are about it. And I really want to talk about that because there is a group of people who will fall into this category, and I don't see it talked about a lot. So that's why I named this episode When Another Career Plus Job is Not the Solution. So what is the solution? The solution is to become your own boss, so you can finally take control, so much more control of the context factors that have been causing you so much pain so far, and solve for them and own the context. Right? Now, obviously, some people need to change both the subject and the context, right? But that's not what this particular episode is about. I got plenty of other episodes about that. But I want to make sure that for those of you for whom the context and not the subject is actually the problem, that there is an episode there for you so you can avoid ending up worse, right? I also know that some of you might be thinking right away, but Rikke, I'm not the entrepreneurial type. Keep listening. Please don't poo-poo the solution before we've even gotten clear on your problem. So keep listening. Now, I want you to meet Sam, because the best way to show you this in action is to tell you about Sam. So very recently, I was working with a client who I bet some of you can relate to and who very well illustrates the problem I've been outlining in this episode. And Sam really represents a smaller but not unimportant segment of my client group and really represents someone I come across on a regular basis. So, Sam is a 47-year-old data scientist. And when she first came to work with me, she was working for a private sector company in the healthcare industry as an employee. And she told me she had been quite unhappy in her jobs for a long time. And now she was ready to find something she could be more passionate about and also just be allowed to get on with her work. Now, when I asked her how she'd try to solve this problem on her own before she came to work with me, she told me that she'd tried working in different work cultures. She worked in academia, the public sector, the private sector. She'd also worked for private sector consulting firms. She'd always worked in healthcare and always as an employee. But when she tried to change to different sectors, from public to private or private to private sector consulting, she might get a little bit of relief in the new environment for a while. But then she'd come up against exactly the same problem again and again. After sort of 3 to 6 months, the novelty would wear off of the new job and the reality of the day-to-day would hit her. She'd also try to find, different careers, different jobs. So she spent an awful lot of time. And then, by the way, I'm laughing because I know a lot of you can relate to this. She'd spend an awful amount of time on job boards looking for other careers and other industries, jobs in other careers, jobs in other industries. But she'd never really feel terribly excited about any of them because she was just like, ugh, I'm not really sure that's going to make any difference. So she'd then end up in this scenario where she'd think, oh, maybe it's not that bad. Maybe I should just be grateful to have a job, right? I'm sure a lot of you have been there. Interestingly, when I asked her about who she looked up to or who she felt inspired by, who were her role models, none of them were ever an employee. They tended to be entrepreneurs or other self-employed type of people, interestingly enough, in the same industry as her. But she didn't think she was like them. She didn't have anybody in her family who would ever run their own company. Now, and this is important, she also had some financial constraints that meant that she couldn't just quit her job from one day to the other and not have money coming in whilst she went all in on the next thing. And I know this is a context a lot of you find yourself in, and I think it's really important to talk about because you do have options. Now, let's talk about the process that I took her through, or part of the process, because again, we wanted to make sure we were identifying her real problem so we'd actually find a solution that would solve it. So when I started working with Sam, we didn't start the process like a lot of other people do by looking at alternative careers or at what kind of business should she start or what kind of career should she move into. What we did, and this is so important for making sure you don't end up worse. We started by diagnosing and identifying the real problem to be solved. I always say, make sure you diagnose before you prescribe. I do this with all of my private clients. I literally give them a career change prescription. So, because here's what I found over the 20 years, over 2 decades that I help people change careers or start their own business is that career change, and I alluded to this a little bit early on, but when you are professional over 40 who can't just move back in with your parents, to a large extent, a career change process is a problem-solving exercise. Yes, we do want to make sure we find something that's a lot more meaningful, a lot more exciting, that's a lot more you. But we also want to make sure that we don't risk you ending up worse than before, risk throwing it all away, end up hating that new thing even more. And this can be really hard to do on your own, right? It can be so hard to see the wood for the trees. But one of the great things about being over 40 is that your life, especially your professional life, it will leave you clues if you know where to look for them. So with my clients, I use a variety of diagnostic tools, diagnostic approaches for doing this. But for the purpose of this particular episode, there is one diagnostic tool that I use with my clients that I think you're going to find really useful. And then when I tell you about it, you can do sort of your own version of that to at least get started and start problem solving. And it's what I call the stop doing list. Or I used to call it what I no longer want to touch with a barge pole going forward in my career. So the stop doing list. Because here's something I know and that I've really seen again and again when it comes for my clients who are professionals over 40. When and you might feel this as well. So often when you're like, oh, what else do I want to do? They might not know what they want. They are not really sure what excites them, or they feel very stuck, or they have way, way too many ideas. So people can get really stuck in terms of how to get started. But when I ask my clients to write a stop doing list with their current career in mind, what do you want to stop doing in your career? That they never, ever feel stuck with. Never. You can write loads of things down that you do no longer want to do, that you hate, right? So this might also be a breakthrough moment for you. So make sure that you do this. So here's what I want you to do to go and write down, whether that's on a piece of paper, on your computer, or even use, a voice software to talk into, whatever works for you, whether you're digital or paper-based. So I want you to ask yourself, what do I want to stop doing or start moving away from going forward in my career? So what I want you to do is I want you to identify the elements, the ingredients that have consistently, and consistently is the key word here, that have consistently caused you the most pain and frustration in your career so far. You know, the things that you do not want to replicate in whatever comes next as much as possible, right? So write those down, the things that you want to stop doing, you want to move away from going forward in your career. What are the elements, the things that have most consistently caused you the most pain and frustration in your career so far, right? Write them down. And when you do that, I want you to focus on the showstopper. Don't be a nitpicker, right? Focus on the showstoppers. And what I mean when I say that is that there are real painful things. They're the ones that really hurt. They're not just minor inconveniences. You know, they are things that are generally part of the problem. So write them down. Now, before I share what was on Sam's list, I want you to know something really important. In my experience over the last 20 plus years, your stop doing list is one of the places where you will see the clearest indication of the type of career change you actually need, whether it's subject or context or one or the other or both, right? It will really help us understand what is it that needs changing first. So keep that in mind when I walk you through what Sam wrote down. So here are some of the biggest things on Sam's list. She hates it working in a toxic workplace. Like the amount of details she gave me around the excessive office politics, the toxic work culture, the toxic colleagues, the bullying was just so painful. This is one of the things, by the way, if right now you're being bullied at work, you are not alone. I am shocked about the amount of bullying that actually goes on. We thought that would have stopped at school, but no. It just goes on and on and on. So a lot of you might find you are in a really toxic workplace, not just now, but throughout your career. That's just been something. Also, what she really hated, and that was consistent throughout her career, was this really long hours culture but not just that, but with very little respect for her life outside of work. So the problem wasn't necessarily the long hours, but the fact that they were totally out of her hands. Tough luck if she was going to a wedding. Now suddenly the project changed. She had to work at the weekend, or she was trying to plan when to go to a doctor, when to go on holiday. And it was really hard to plan ahead because something always came and stole her life outside of work away, totally out of her hands. Also, a real issue was, even though she was now being, more senior, she still had incompetent and uncaring managers, bosses that she did not look up to, she did not enjoy working for because their style was so different to her and would permeate everything she would do at work because they were so bloody incompetent and so horrible. There's also issues consistently around her picking up other people's slack because her standards were very high and she was so quick. So she just ended up, she almost couldn't help herself, just doing the work of other people who weren't pulling their weight. And I'm sure some of you can relate to this. All that dead wood that's floating around that still has a job and you have to pull the weight for them and do their job. Right? There was also an enormous frustration for Sam of not being able to choose her own tech stack, the tools she actually used. And this is a massive issue if your work is technology and you cannot choose your own tech tools. And especially work within a context where some of them might be outdated, or these are the tools we always worked around here, so why should we, change them and all of that. And again, a lot of her energy at work was wasted on solving other people's mistake or having downstream issues because someone further up didn't do things properly or didn't care enough. So as a result, Sam often ended up doing 10 people's job description instead of her own, right? Those ones you might be able to relate to, or maybe not. But if you are, that's really important to notice. But an even more important thing to notice here is, did you notice something else? Or rather, did you notice the absence of something? Was there anything on Sam's list about data science, or about technology, or about data, or about science, or about all of the regular activities and the subject matter that actually made up her day-to-day work as a data scientist? Anything like, I hate working with technology, I hate crunching data, I hate visuals, I hate dashboards, I hate healthcare. No, there was literally not a single element If I did not know Sam and I read through that list, I wouldn't even know she was a data scientist. There was nothing in there about her subject. Rather, and you should be able, my dear listener, to already diagnosed, do you see what that list is all about? That list is pure context. The how, the who, the where, and the when. So do you see why a diagnosis of where the big problem actually sits is so key? This is how, for some of you, if you fall into this is how we literally avoid throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because we're basing our diagnosis on your lived work experience, not some vague idea about what you think your problem might be, if you even wonder about that, right? And for Sam, every single pain point on that list is an almost direct result of being an employee. She had such little control over the context factors. And here's the thing, if she found another career and then still got a job in that, she might just be lucky to maybe in one job find a better manager, but she might still have the work culture problem. And then the next one, she might have a crap manager and this and that. So she wouldn't actually be able to solve the main problem that she's having. And interestingly enough, the problem is contextual. It's not about her subject, right? Now, I just wanted to double click on that diagnosis before we proceeded to the solution with Sam, because I wanted to make sure we had the diagnosis right. Again, like I say, for some people, the problem is both the subject and the context, and there's a variety of combinations as well. So even though I could see there was nothing there about the subject for Sam, I also just wanted to have a conversation around it. And so one of the things that I asked Sam to consider was, Sam, when you look back over your career and also now, when you have been, or you are actually allowed to just get on with your work, left to your own devices and working directly with clients, with people, without, politics or middlemen, do you actually enjoy what you do as a scientist if you sort of take the context away from it? And Sam was like, you know what? She had such a massive breakthrough actually doing this exercise. She was like, you know what? When I am actually allowed to just get on with my subject, with my profession, I actually really enjoy being a data scientist. She also told me she even read about her field, her profession. She also really cared about the industry she was working in, healthcare. She even read about it in her own time and kept up to date. Now, this is really, really important. It's a real, red flag to me if you do not care about your subject or your industry and you don't, even in your own time, read about it or, keep up to scratch. But she did. So this is really, really important insight for her to have, that actually it was the context that needed changing, not the subject. And like I say, even though this is not the most frequent experience for my clients to have, it is still a big enough percentage of my clients that end up having this realization like Sam. So I think it's really, really important to talk about, because on social media and in general, you see the focus always being on massive career change, from law to fashion or for this to that. But sometimes what you need to change is not the subject. It's not the subject that's draining you. It wasn't the subject that was draining Sam. Like, that doesn't mean she couldn't change it, but remember, she had constraining factors. But what's important for us to understand is it wasn't the subject that was draining her. It was everything around it, the context, the way in which she had so far in her career chosen to undertake to practice that profession. So now we knew exactly what we needed to start solving for. But before we move on to that, I want you to sit with a question. So often people, they kick off the career change process with, what career should I change into? But a much better question to ask is actually, is my problem what I do, the subject, or how I do it, the context? For some of you, that's going to be a much more important question to ask, and then figure out, is it the subject that's the problem? Is it the context? Or is it both? Or is it one of them? Super important, so you then don't end up replicating or making your problem worse in the next thing. Now we identified the problem, which is very much what this episode is all about. But I know you might also be curious about, well, what actually did we end up, prescribing? What was the solution for Sam? So I want to briefly just touch about that because it will be really inspiring for others of you as well. All right, let's get problem solving. So the real problem we needed to solve as part of Sam's career change process was getting control over as many of those context elements as possible over time so that she could over time minimize that pain that was coming from the context and over time, and ideally as soon as possible, free up the energy and space to do her best work and truly thrive. And that's what's so beautiful if you realize that your issue is very much contextual. The more we get control over those contextual pains and turn them to advantage, the more you're going to love your work and you're going to thrive. And for Sam, the best solution for that, and also for many of you listening, especially professionals over 40, in terms of things we could explore without risking everything or starting from scratch and honoring her financial constraints, is and was the self-employment route. Working towards starting her own full-time consulting firm over time, i.e. work for herself with a view to step by step, month by month, year by year, gaining as much more control over the context as possible. Now, Sam, like many of you, she couldn't just drop everything overnight and not have money coming in and then work on her own company from day one. And you know what? She didn't need to. You don't need to. What I often use with my clients to get them started is what I call the portfolio career change model that can help you start your transition. And this means that you create a variety, several different income streams instead of just relying on just one job and one income stream. So you can get, stay cash flow healthy whilst you work towards starting your own full-time company over time. And this is what I love about working with professionals over 40. You already have, whether you want to change away from it or not, you already have, and you've heard me talk about this before, you have a cash cow. You have an existing profession, a career, a set of proven skills that you can use to make money on your terms. You do not have to stay stuck in a toxic job that steals all hours of the day, all the energy, or, literally suck all hours of energy out of your day, which for Sam and for many of you is your current scenario. So you cannot do anything whatsoever. What she could do is take control, take that highly valuable skill set elsewhere and change your day-to-day reality overnight to a large extent. So what Sam would do is to look for data science part-time or fractional jobs or contract work or work from home contract / roles. The type of work that she could easily do, already knows how to do, but that frees up more time and energy, either because you work from home and hence have less of the context in your face, or you work less hours. So both of those things, freeing up both time and energy, will help her build her new thing over time. This is so important to know you have this power because so many people just feel, but I can't just quit my job and not have any money. You don't need to. You just need to find a job that is more suitable to help you build on the side the business that's going to allow you to take control of the context factors. Okay? Now, yes, initially as you use your cash cow, for Sam, there will still be some context issues. But what those cash cows jobs they will help her do is to build her escape away from them over time because they help her finance and build that business on the side at the same time, right? So many people, they sit there, I can't do anything. I need to wait for some magical time where everything lines up. That's not going to happen. Nobody ever has to stay stuck in a job they hate. You can start solving your problems, especially if they're contextual, as soon as you know what your problem is, because then you will know what the solution is. So what Sam needed to do now was to start building up her own consulting firm on the side. She'd actually had some consulting firm experience inside of her job, and she loved when she could work directly with clients. And what's different with this is that whereas the way she had practiced her current profession was more like a cash cow where she works for someone else, now what she wants to build up over time is a consulting firm where she only offers her best skill set. And what I mean by that is with your own firm, with your own company, what we should focus as doing as looking at what is that you enjoy doing the most and are also bloody good at. And what kind of clients can you find that will value that and you the most? And where can you control the contextual factors as much as possible? That's what's different between the cash cow gigs and the company you want to build. Because obviously, we want to make sure we solve all of your career change problems. So we want to make sure we only build on the bits of your profession, of your subject that you love, that you're bloody good at, and make that expand over time. So in order to start doing that, we needed to figure out what is Sam's first ideal first client offer going to be. And this is where so many people who try to figure this out on their own, they go wrong. They think purely about what they want and what's in it for them. And then they end up building a service that nobody wants to buy and that nobody needs. So what I did was help Sam develop a consulting offer that combined both what she already most enjoyed and what she was bloody good at, and that had consistently gotten the best results for others, so that she could offer this first consulting package with confidence and a proven track record. So many of you listening, you already have this. And here's the thing. Rather than thinking about herself as this entrepreneur who's going to start a massive business, which could be intimidating, all we're doing is we're just focusing on coming up with the first step, a small consulting client offer, a small package that would allow you to trial out self-employment on your terms. And also, this is what's so great about consulting. You can easily come up with just a small consulting package that you can deliver and you can be confident in. Something small and concrete. Don't get intimidated by, oh my God, I have to start this massive business. No, you can start small but concrete. Something you already know you can get results in. You've been getting results for years for your internal clients and the jobs you've had. Now you are just taking that directly to the clients you choose. No middleman. And that's really what a lot of this is about. Cut out all the middleman crap that you get when you're an employee. All right? And also, more excitingly, no employer gets to keep your value. You get it all. Get greedy, my friend, and start focusing on what you want as well as what you can offer in exchange. And again, I will repeat this because it is so important. The best way to figure out what that package is, look at what you're bloody good at and enjoy. That's the intersection. Bloody good at and enjoy, not just one or the other. But that also gets real results for a client where you can solve really meaty problems. What are the things that you can pull together without overwhelming yourself, that you can actually solve some real concrete problems with and know you can deliver? So for Sam, when I helped her identify what this could be for her, what were some of the big achievements? What was she really good at? It was clear to me that the perfect setup was consulting. So what she loved the most and what she could take straight into a first consulting package was her clients, have really messy, intimidating, overwhelming health data. And they didn't know what to do with it, but what she did and what she enjoyed and was so good at was turn that into frameworks and dashboards that would help clients inform their strategy. Whoa, that's really what you want to do. Imagine her clients. They have messy, overwhelming data that's a painful problem for them. They don't know what to do with it, how to make decisions from it. But at the same time, it's so valuable. They're losing so much money by not taking real data into consideration. And that's a real offer, really concrete offer for Sam to sell. She already had the experience of working with clients through her employer, whether they were internal or external. You don't need an employer to allow you to do that for someone else. Just go straight to your ideal client that need what you have to offer. And also another thing, by the way, I was able to help her see through the work that I did with her is that she actually had a really unique combination of skills. She was strong both technically, and she also had superb interpersonal and communication skills. And that's a real unique thing in her field she didn't even realize. But that's getting off track. Let's wrap up here. Do you see? She didn't actually need to change her subject or her expertise or her profession at all. She just needed to find more exciting clients and more interesting problems to solve for them. She moved to the sort of more fast-moving, exciting end of healthcare that she actually had a real interest in and loved and wanted to keep up with, rather than the part she'd been stuck in because that's what her employer insisted on. Assignments on her terms for clients that she chose with increasing control over the context factors over time. And in the process, created the most meaningful and will create the most meaningful and exciting work of her life because she was focused on doing what she both enjoyed and was bloody good at. And that is what figuring out your real problem, your real career problem can do for you. So you end up creating the best work of your life rather than going from the frying pan to the fire. So let's close off. There is nothing more powerful for you as a professional over 40 than taking control over how you like to function in the world of work, right? So many of us are just very sensitive to the context of who we work with or how we work or where we work or when we work. You know, how you might be doing that as an employee right now is potentially not leading to your best work. You should be really, really curious. If you're finding you come to the end of this episode and you're like, oh my God, I am so happy I'm not the only person who feels this way, sensitive to how I work or when I work or who I work with and all of that. And you have really high standards, you find it really hard to work with people with those standards, and you end up always picking up the slack, and you are the type of person who's actually phenomenal good value for your employer. You have other options that you really should look into. But for some of you, that also means getting over yourself and realizing that starting your own company is actually the best solution. Now, right now, you might not see yourself as the entrepreneurial type. You do not need to. If you've never been one, it is very normal not to feel like one. Instead, I want you to think of what you're really doing when you're becoming your own boss. What you're doing is being really smart about how you can create a more ideal work context for yourself, how you can personally take responsibility for creating the best possible conditions for feeling at home in the world of work so that you can create your best work rather than outsourcing or handing that power over to someone else like an employer, right? So if that appeals to you, welcome home. If you want to make sure you identify the right problem and hence also find the right solution for you, that's what I do for a living. Come over to thecareerchangepodcast.com. I can help you with that. Here's to making ourselves at home in the world of work rather than just making everybody else decide or dictate what our experience is like. And that is something you can start changing very quickly. Thank you so much for listening. You're not alone.